Hey everyone, welcome back to Be Not Afraid. This week, I really want to focus on social and emotional learning, and I want to go straight to the source that everything is kind of umbrellaed under, which is CASEL. We started this last week, and I wanted to give more of a focused kind of understanding so that you can see how you're being gaslit as parents. So what I'm going to do first is show you just a general flyer of what it looks like and how parents are presented that social and emotional learning is. So let me just share my screen. Of course, it doesn't want to let me show exactly where I was. Okay. So this is Christine. Can you see
Yes,
it?
I can see
Okay.
it.
And everybody, my guest host today is Christine Seafin with Critical Therapy Antidote. She is a therapist and has taught therapeutic education. So I thought it would be wonderful to have her on to give input, to really explain from a professional level what's going on. So this is what a flyer typically looks like that goes out to parents. Cultivating social and emotional wellness in your student. Teach your kids to value their own unique characteristics and abilities. Sorry about that. Teach your kids to value their own unique characteristics and abilities. When you feel comfortable with who your child is, they feel comfortable with themselves. When they feel comfortable with themselves, they will flourish. There's nothing scary about that, right? And here's the district that it's in. This is in Utah.
This is so interesting. The way that they sort of elevate the child and parentify the child in a sense by saying that you, as a parent, must become comfortable with them. That's a total role reversal in a family dynamic or a family structure, a healthy structure unit. That's sort of parentifying the child and making the parents go along. That's what really bothers me about that sentence.
Yeah. And the other thing that really bothers me is that their own unique characteristics. But as we
Yes.
get into Castle, you'll find out that that is not something that's celebrated. It is always ultimately about the collective.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go over here to the Castle School Guide. Can you still see everything?
I can.
Okay. So, and I just want to show you how I got there, hopefully. Okay. So you have to dig quite a bit to get into the Castle School Guide. But what I went into was I typed in the word equity up here, you can see,
Yes.
and then I did a search. And then I just went to the first one, guiding questions for educators, promoting equity using SEL in our schools. So then I click onto it. And here are just the guiding questions. Personally, I find them quite alarming.
In what way does your identity, race, ethnicity, social class status, gender, language, learning, ability, strength, interests inform who you are as an educator? Can you recall times or events in which your identity was made obvious or important to you? What did you come to understand from the experience? This is,
I'm going to attempt to open it up and see what I get yeah, this is not what they present on those front pages for all of these parents.
no.
So, um,
And it looks like they're wanting it looks like they're wanting the therapists to do internal therapeutic work on themselves that they bring
yes.
into the classroom. So this becomes this sort of group therapy among the teachers or educators.
And that's what's
And
really important is that they're turning the teachers into therapists.
that's right. There's a little website out there, which is, I don't remember what it's called, but it's Purchase Your Own Mindfulness Toolbox. Everything you need
Right.
to know about mindfulness and using it in the classroom, which is an intervention that is used therapeutically for specific cases, specific reasons, specific kinds of trauma. It's not to be used lightly by people who are not professionally trained to do that.
Right.
and in that context.
Yeah. But it is being taught, especially to our youngest teachers that are still
Yes.
in school, that this is the new way of school. So, what I found really interesting was that ethnic studies and SEL have the same goals.
Mm-hmm.
So, how much time on the core subjects without this stuff interwoven are our students actually getting?
Well, that's the thing, right? They're only in school a set amount of hours a day, set amount of
Right.
days a year. And this is taking up, and it's interesting. That has come to mind for me so many times, but I've never really said it out loud, just for whatever reason, my mind strays off into other things. But this is a lot of time and it's a lot of work that students aren't going to be using to learn education, their history, writing, math, all those things. And they're spending it learning this type of stuff, which is nonsense to begin with. Shouldn't be taught by teachers at all, anyhow. And so much of their time is being thrown away. I mean, this is a huge problem. But
Well,
I
except
guess
it's
it's
not being thrown away, right? Because what they're doing is teaching our kids to be activists.
yes, they're teaching them to be activists, and at the end of the day, there is not going to be. I mean, they want to, there are radical schools in New York City that want to toss out the grading system altogether. So
Right.
there is, no matter what, everyone's gonna pass and get a big fat trophy as first place, every single one in class, as long as they did their SEL work and as long as they did their, they wrote about what the teacher implored them to write about connected to ethnic studies or SEL. It has nothing to do with them earning an A or earning a B or earning a C because based on merit and their performance in class. So they can afford to just dedicate all this time. It's very calculated
Right.
and everybody's going to get an A anyway because we've already lowered the education standards. Well, we must do that. If you're going to spend half the day teaching this or more, you have to lower the education standards because you don't
Absolutely.
have time to teach them the material.
Right. And it's not important because, again, they're
Exactly.
going to be a useless class. So, parents, I want you to look that this is Castle. So, you go to castle.org or schoolguide.castle.org, and then you go into the whole school or the school guide. And so then you'll see how it works, school-wide process, track your progress and resources. So we can look at how it works. For whatever reason, hitting buttons isn't working for me. So I'll just go over here. I wanted to go back to this list anyways and
Yes.
just explain it again. And this is what I mean when I say that it's this is what I mean when I say that it's exactly verbatim verbatim what ethnic studies is. SEL can be a powerful level for creating caring, just, inclusive, and healthy communities. I have to do this segue. It was just leaked the Nashville shooters information,
Mm-hmm.
and the things that that person was saying sounds just like the things that the kids are trained on through this. So do those fighting for Palestine right now, or just protesting in general and excusing violence because of violence to to push out colonialism
Yeah,
is
and
just
my yes, and 1 mile away from my home, my Jewish husband had to drive down the street and look at signs with swastikas all over them. That has been happening every single weekend since the Hamas initial strike. And the police were called to intervene this past weekend because there were several people there that were armed and there were threats. That's what we face and what we're facing over here on a regular basis now. This is all stuff they're learning in school, and it's everything that the school has is standing by. It's their mission. It's their, I mean, and I'm sure parents, I don't know how many have heard about what's going on in the colleges and the rampant protesting that's happening that's causing a lot of violence and a lot of anti-Semitism to be not only tolerated but actually encouraged, meaning you can leave your class. There's a couple professors that were allowing for that in Columbia University. You can leave your class and get credit by going to a protest in support of Palestine and Hamas, I guess.
right.
Um, which is just absolutely horrifying because this is infiltrated. And we've been saying this for a long time. Carrie, I know you have too. We've been saying this for a long time. It's not just going to be the schools, it's going to infiltrate the community, it's going to infiltrate every part of our lives in very powerful ways. That's actually very frightening. If this is not just a joke or something that's being overstated, we'll say. You
Right.
can't state it enough because now this is the tone that's been set culturally in this cultural revolution that we're facing. Who are going to be the main targets? Well, the kids ultimately. That's who's going to be the target. Why? Because the kids are going to grow into adulthood and the kids are going to be decision makers. And that's
Or
what,
will they? That's the big
well, or
question
will,
is will they?
good
Because
question.
so many
Yes.
times the useful class in a revolution, which is what's happening,
Yes.
they are, I've seen so many, I don't usually watch TikTok, but sometimes on YouTube something will come across that'll be a clip and you will see them say things like, um, we're not going to ask permission. We're going to
Yes.
take you down. It's going to be bloody. And I think that the kids, been desensitized a lot of times through social media and also through the gaming that they do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they understand the level of what they're doing. I think that if somebody came to their house and chopped off their siblings' fingers or something as terrible, I mean, way worse than
Yes.
that was happening. I'm trying to be gentle here.
Yes.
But the thing is that these are not people who understand much because in reality, the Jewish community in America tends to be pretty liberal.
Yes, it is.
So they probably believe the same things about equity and social and emotional learning that the other side does.
Mhm.
And now they're seeing it turned on them, which they always say that snake, the woke snake eats its tail.
Yes.
And they're already doing that in such a vile way. But another thing that you pointed out was communities. And that's the thing is that this is not just about schools. This starts in the schools. It starts in the
Mhm.
universities, it goes down to the
Yes.
K-12, and then it becomes a thing in your community where kids will cancel you. They will cancel
Yes.
each other. They will take pictures of, oh, that person misgendered me. I'm going to take a picture of their driver's license. Then I'm going to look them up. Then I'm going to call their business and get them fired.
Yes.
And I'm not saying this hyperbolically. I'm saying this from living in Seattle.
From
They,
actual examples and proof, I mean, none of this is
yes,
hyperbolic. That there's evidence to back this up in the way of proof, proof
yes,
that this is happening because we A, have seen it ourselves. B, we've driven down the street and seen the swastikas on the signs on the corner here where I live. And we from my perspective as a therapist, I still have many colleagues that are in the mental health profession, have watched what they're being told to do and not to do with the children um, who are coming in for treatment. I'm going to tell you, just the other day, a friend of mine sent me, and I consider her to be very dear. Not only that, very balanced and grounded. And I just want to start there. She sent a little picture of some, I guess, kids that were putting on makeup, and one of them was a boy. And she proceeded to speak very highly of this young boy and how beautiful his face looks with the makeup. Um, I had a problem with that. I didn't say anything. Okay. I'm not perfect. I don't fight everybody, but that's a huge problem when it wasn't a red flag and here's an issue we need to look at. It's wow, look at how beautiful this person looks with this beautiful makeup on. So people are getting converted on a daily basis. And again, these are people that were very kind of strong foundationally in the foundation of therapy and the ethos of therapy, who are being swayed and being sucked in themselves. I don't think that there's even any awareness that it's happening. I mean, it's
it is
mind-boggling.
it is so, so tricky. I did an interview the last week with Patricia McCormick, and she wrote the book Sold. So it's about sex trafficking.
Mm,
And as we listened, I did find myself finding common ground with her, and I found her to be a lovely person. So let me just put that out there. But at the same time, it is tricky where you go, what am I willing to compromise on? Okay, there was a time when Sally has two mommies would not have sat at all okay with me in the classroom. But that's where we are, and there are people in that situation. And so for me now, I'm saying no sexuality. That's my line in the sand.
mhm,
No sex, no pictures
mhm,
of, people in a bedroom doing whatever they're doing. I don't care what their gender, whatever, who they're doing it with.
mhm, mhm,
That is my hard line in the sand.
mhm,
But a story about homosexual parents they're just homosexual parents. That's where we are as a country.
mhm,
And I do think it's wrong to deprive the kids um, who are in that class of that story. But I
Sure.
do, but it crosses, and it also crosses the lines with gender identity, because I believe that our children are being gaslit in the most disgusting way possible.
Mhm,
I was just in Salt Lake, and we were at a museum. I took some kids to a museum, and the top floor was nothing but mental health. It was nothing but celebrate your all of your issues.
mm.
And I just thought they're really targeting these kids.
Yes, they are. At a very impressionable time when they're still in the process of identity formation and they're in the process of individuating from their families, but still, working out how can I be an individual and differentiate from my family while at the same time maintain close bonds and relationships with my family as well. And
Yep.
this is what they're struggling with. And this is a very vulnerable time. And then this ideology comes in and it has an answer to every one of your questions.
And that's what it is. It's never, because therapy, from having years and years and years of therapy, and you also being a therapist, seems to me that the goal of therapy used to be to have an end in sight, to have a place
Yes,
where you could, right?
that bingo. The idea is not to be in therapy forever. That idea there's some, we can get this, that's a whole nother ball of worms, but in common day practice, the idea is that you are not in therapy for the rest of your life. You are there to do the work and take those skills and use them and learn how to cope and move forward. If something else happens and you need to go, then you go. But again, even that is not meant to be forever. That's a
Right.
huge, I'm so glad you brought that point up.
Well,
Um,
I think it's relevant to what we're talking about.
yes,
This is all about normalizing mental health. Now, I don't think anyone should be shamed for having mental health issues.
sure,
They should be helped, but
sure.
helping means it has an end in sight.
That's right.
So let's just look at these. All students bring to school their identities, their strengths, their values, their lived experiences, and their culture. Is that what school's about? You just need to ask yourself, is that what school's about? I'm sorry, I'm reading up here.
I see.
SEL does not seek to have students conform to the values and preferences of the dominant culture. Why? Don't we have something called best practices?
Yes,
Um, if America, and what they will say is America is whiteness,
yes,
but our best practices don't necessarily just come from quote unquote white people.
they do not.
So, but uplifts and promotes understandings of the assets of diverse individuals and communities.
Dominant
What?
culture has come to have a very negative connotation, but you can look at any aspect of the culture we live in, even with minorities, and you can point out a place in which they're part of the quote unquote dominant culture. You have parents from Mexico, let's just say, who I worked with, who do not support their children who are gay. They don't support it. They're very Catholic, they're very religious, they don't believe in it. that is part of a dominant culture way of thinking, even though those are diverse people with different cultural backgrounds. But that is the dominant, predominant, culture in which we live. So it is not always a good thing, and it's not always a bad thing. It's just something that is. And it's labeled oftentimes as being a bad thing without actually looking at the fact that you have way more people who are part of this dominant culture, even your own self,
Right.
right? Without, constantly focusing on the marginalization and what tears people apart, or what brings divisiveness. So dominant culture, it doesn't have to be positive or negative. It just exists. It is what it is.
Right. Well,
It's a
and
way to explain a large group of people's belief system. I mean, that's pretty much it.
right. And what's happening is that we are trying so hard to be quote unquote kind that
Yes.
we are forgetting who we are, and we are laying down best practices to accommodate,
Yes.
oftentimes for a lack of reality. They'll say, well, whose reality? I'm sorry, but there is a solid reality
Yes.
in many things. I had somebody who asked me a very, in my opinion, ignorant question and said, well, does every single person driving down the road drive at 70 miles per hour? And just driving down the freeway, right? And the comment, what he meant was that people drive at different levels, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a truth that there's a speed limit. There's a
Yes.
sign, you're supposed to follow it. That's the
Yes.
best practice.
Yes.
And we are getting rid of those best practices, especially um, especially to cater to, I mean, ultimately what they're doing is catering towards Marxism, but they
Yes.
don't know it. Every group thinks that they're being told they're catering towards them, making them feel the most included.
Yes.
But all of them are fractions that will turn against each other.
Yes.
Okay, so SEL, what it looks like. Schools use SEL as a framework to examine the importance and the range of adult and student identities and assets. Remember back to that page that I shared at the beginning, it was all about helping a child feel comfortable in their identity.
I
This is, go ahead. Yes.
There's not one word on this entire page that says education. There is not one word on this entire page that says teaching. Not one word.
Wow. Yeah. And students' identities and assets reflect and appreciate diversity and foster an inclusive environment. Let me,
Unbelievable.
you can't have an inclusive environment and be sensitive to everybody's needs,
Yes.
because your Russian Orthodox
Yes.
person has their feelings, and your Muslim has their feelings, and your Christian has their feelings, and your Mormon might even have other feelings all across the board. And yet we're supposed to create an inclusive environment. We were already there. You know how we were there? We didn't talk about it.
Yes.
Or we brought it in terms of like, I'm the student of the week. This is my story. And you said,
Yes.
oh, nice, awesome, wonderful. You could ask a few questions. It wasn't everything is about how a person feels.
Yes. And the best practice dominant culture in the classroom is supposed to be one of learning for the greater group. There's going to be those kids that are going to have to go to special ed, okay, just to break it down into that kind of example. And that's fine, but you don't bring the whole class down to meet the special ed child's needs. You keep the best practice in the teaching to meet the general needs of the general students that are there. Then you have specialized, treatment plans and course of action that you take for the special needs.
Well,
There
and best
again, you're
practices
seeing a
is,
best practice dominant culture.
yeah, well, best practices is actually to teach to the high end of the class so that they're not
Yep.
sitting and waiting
Yes.
and wasting their time, which this
Yes.
feels like a lot. I was directing a theater program, and when I first came in, I came in the middle, and the kids were like, "Well, you need to ask all of our pronouns in attendance first." And I said, "No, I don't." And
Uh-uh.
some of the kids got upset, and I said, "Here's what we're going to do, because you guys you guys are in, you have a problem. I was asked to come in to intervene because you have a problem. Your show was nowhere near ready to go up. It opens
Mhm,
in 2 weeks.
mhm,
So I put the paper on the board, and I said, when you walk in, sign your name. I'll know
mhm,
who's here and who's not. That's it. But then if you want to write your pronouns, that's fine. But we're not going to spend 40 minutes of an hour and a half class
mhm,
going over this stuff because that's not best practice. It's not effective.
mhm, mhm.
And so here, let's look at this. Schools adopt an evidence-based programs. Can you
Mm.
talk to that? Because to me,
Yeah, the
evidence-based,
evidence-based program, I think, and I can't assume, but what I believe to be the case here is they're talking about evidence-based treatment programs or treatment in therapy. And they're using that and they're trying to widen the scope and adjust it to fit kids so that teachers can teach with that lens of a therapist and use therapy minded interventions and call it an evidence-based program in school. That's what they're doing. They're actually taking from the therapy field what's evidence-based to work when you're working with kids of a certain age with certain symptoms and histories, and
but wouldn't
they're
this
making
change?
it adaptable to
But
everybody else.
wouldn't this change? This is what my point on evidence-based is that they're only looking for sources within their own ideology.
Yes.
So as a therapist who works with other therapists to try to save traditional therapy,
Yes.
they're not going with best practices here, are they?
No, they are not, because that is true. Even within therapy, people have different orientations, they have different models, they have different theoretical, direction where they go. And that means that they can see something from multiple viewpoints. All of that is the end goal is the same for all of them. But the multiple viewpoints and the discussions on why psychoanalysis is better or more effective or less effective than CBT models, and why CBT models work so well with 12-step programs, but not so well with other types of trauma treatments or whatever, which actually they use it for trauma too. Anyway, the point is that all of that is considered valid and all of that is considered a theoretical orientation, and it's considered to be models and methods that can be used in different ways by different therapists to treat different people with different problems. There is no evidence based that covers everything. It only covers one particular lens of therapy, and that is the behavioral model. But to even teach that, you need to be qualified, meaning you need to have a degree and a license.
Right. Which teachers don't have.
Correct.
But then on top of that, uh, the programs that I've seen implemented, they would say evidence-based. Kids don't need grades. Grades are upsetting to kids. Grades harm them. That's evidence-based.
Another evidence says what? That when you give a kid a goal to reach, like getting a good grade, they're more likely to reach it with encouragement from the adults around them because they're more likely to believe in themselves and they're more likely to exceed their own expectations of their own progress. That's evidence-based too.
Right.
Contradiction.
Yes. SEL is a strategy for systemic improvement, not just an intervention for at-risk students. This is the one that we briefly talked about last week
Yes.
about acting like every child needs chemotherapy when one child has cancer,
Yes. That is such a great analogy.
which is really, really terrible.
Mm-hmm. It
Okay,
is.
so systemic implementation fosters school-wide conditions that promote social and emotional growth for all students, including opportunities to build trusting relationships. What do you think they mean here? Trusting relationships.
Yeah, trusting relationships between the students and the adults. I mean, I think the trusting relationships, if I'm going to go this direction, um, can support groomers. Okay, I'm just going to say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and people that may not have the best intentions for that child, and that child's well-being. And even if they have the good intentions, they may not be educated well enough to understand what it is they're advising those children to do or not do. I mean, what happened to the whole, be wary of strangers and come home and tell your parents if you run into somebody who's a stranger that tried to kidnap you? What happened there? What happened to if an adult tells you to keep something a secret? That's the very first clue that you need to tell someone about it. So this is doing the opposite. It's building these relationships that are trusting, where secrets are kept. That's the very beginning of secret keeping.
Right. Yeah, it's actually quite frightening, because
Mm-hmm.
if you tell a child, what happens in the classroom stays in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I never say that to my students. They'll
Mm-hmm.
ask me a question and I'll say, you know what, you need to go home and talk about that with your parents, or I'll send the link out to your whole family and you can look at that together.
Yep.
So whatever you can do, because I'm sorry, but parents overall, and this is coming from somebody who did not come from good parents by any means.
Right.
Parents overall have the best interest
Yes.
in their children's life.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, I've had a lot of teachers say, "No, I love my kids like my own." No, you don't. I'm sorry, you can love your kids. I adore my children. I adore my students. But at the end of the day, or the end of the term, or the end of the year,
Yes.
the thing that I'm most focused on is whether or not my child passed, whether or not
Yes.
my own child, succeeded.
Yes.
That's where my focus, that's where my stress comes from ultimately.
Yes.
So, trust in relationships, welcoming learning environments. This is about LGBTQIA plus.
100%.
Like, there's no other group qualifies.
Yes.
If you are another country, if you are Muslim and you are Black and you say, I don't agree with that, tough cookies.
That's right.
Because welcoming is about LGBTQIA plus. Even if you are gay or lesbian and you say, I don't want this person on my team or this person in the bathroom with me,
Yes.
your wishes, your concerns, your identity is forgotten.
That's right.
And the T is first and foremost.
That's right.
Um, Consistent routines, okay. Engaging teaching strategies, sure. Culturally relevant practices, that one pisses me off.
Mm.
You have no idea how I want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea how my children want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
My foster children, how they wanted to learn or needed to learn.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter based on their skin. That is
Mm-mm.
sick, reductive, and bigoted, in my opinion. All of
Yes.
those things.
Yes.
And as far as, oh, okay, as
Yes.
far as the whole best practices, I would say the best practice is to teach our children that they are capable.
Yes.
That's our best practice.
Yes.
Our best practice isn't to add basketballs into the conversation to make
Yes.
it more relevant for those kids.
Yes.
So sorry to get a little sassy there, but that one,
No, but it's true. And I'm still kind of, as you're talking, thinking about referring back to the comparisons between the best practices and what we do for the greater good versus this individualistic type of situation here and dominant culture. It still goes back to that, over and over again for me. And that's what I was thinking about as you were talking, is that's not that's been given such a horrible connotation, but in actuality, it's actually what keeps structure in our community. It's what keeps structure in a school. It's what keeps structure in a society. Not to say that they're always right, or that they're always, that everybody's going to all fit in. It's just, somebody made this kind of analogy to me about all this, about catering. And it's a very good colleague and friend of mine who's trans himself. Okay. He transitioned at the age of 30, 31, something like that. He was an adult. And he said, you know what, Christine, If somebody has celiac disease, it doesn't mean that every restaurant has to cater to having gluten-free choices. If the restaurant doesn't have gluten-free choices, then you're just out of luck and you got to eat somewhere else. We're not going to cater to everybody with dietary restrictions because we simply can't stay open as a business and do that. And to me, that was a very good, very, of course, very simplistic way of viewing it. But the idea there is that this greater good and best practices that benefit the largest amount, most people, while then for those that are on the sidelines are getting specialized, attention or treatment that they need to learn, whether that's special education classes or whatever,
Mhm.
and you're taking care of the herd still as a whole. I mean, so, it's the same idea with that whole restaurant situation. It's like, well, you can't expect every restaurant to accommodate every dietary need. That's just not the way it is. Unfortunately, you have to be the one to choose something different. Unfortunately, you have to, if you don't like the facts and you don't like the teaching of our history or of mathematics, unfortunately, I mean, since when did mathematics become racist? If you are having trouble with mathematics, that doesn't mean you stop teaching mathematics. It means you get a tutor, you go to your teacher, you get some outside help. If your parents aren't around to tutor you, then you find another way. The schools have many resources to provide you with tutoring. It's not that math should be not taught anymore or that math is racist, because the general body of students, the general group of people, the herd, need to learn math.
Right. And it really
I got saucy too. So
it's really about, like, when we turn everything into a focus on them, it's crazy to me that social and emotional learning will say that we're creating a more resilient people.
mm-hmm.
What they mean
No,
is they're creating people ready to be colonized.
that's right. Mini-me's. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, okay, next one. SEL is a way to uplift student voice and promote agency and civic engagement. The goal of SEL is to build skills and competencies, which means making you think in the right way, help
Correct.
students successfully navigate and meaningfully contribute to their schools. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, yeah, because back when I was an intern, the word culturally competent came out for the first time. So I've been licensed. Well, how long have I been? I've been licensed maybe 12 years, but I've been practicing total 18. So let's just go back to when I was a trainee. That was probably about 16 years ago. Cultural competency came out, and I remember very clearly telling my colleague, what the hell is cultural competency anyway? How can you be competent in a culture, in anybody's culture? How can you have any competency? How can you speak on behalf of any culture and require that those within that culture also follow along and also believe in what you're saying and also act as if that made no sense to me then. It makes even less sense to me now. And I knew it was dangerous back at that time. And I refused to use it because I didn't believe in that whole concept of being competent culturally. Because what does that even mean? That I'm supposed to know every single culture that's on the face of the planet
Yeah.
with the way each person practices within that culture? How many cultures are at battle and fighting and warring against each other on any given day in this world? It is constant. It is a constant.
Well, and
Okay.
that would be a beautiful thing if that was the goal. I mean, it would be a
Sure.
lot of work, but that's not what the goal is. The meaning to meaningfully contribute to their schools, careers, families, relationships, and multicultural communities. When they say meaningfully contribute, they mean contribute in the right way, be the right kind of voice. One of
Yes.
the more common things that we hear is that we don't need Black faces who aren't Black voices, i.e., if we
I
right,
I mean,
but
wow.
that's what they mean here. That
Yes.
that is ultimately what they mean. To teach your people to speak and say the right things, to teach your children to show up and advocate for what these ideologues want in the schools. And so they bring a whole classroom of kids to the capitals and they start protesting and think
Yes.
of what's her bucket with the climate change.
Oh, yes.
I can't think of her name.
I can't think of her name. Gruns something. Her last Greta. That's it.
Greta
It's
Thunberg. Yes.
that's it.
Yes.
And it was a G.
And for sure they've been doing it because my son told me that I was saying her name wrong the other day.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
like, I learned about her in fifth grade, mom.
And this is
So
a 20-year-old child. She's like
yes,
20, right? She's a
yes,
child.
yes. But
And
she's
this,
been taught and
yes.
she's been used because she's actually the daughter of a famous actor or the granddaughter of a famous actor. But she
Mm,
stands there and says, how dare you? You've taken away whatever.
right.
But that's what our kids are going to be like in our homes. That is
That's right.
considered best practice, friends. You need to listen. That that attitude, that entitlement, all of that is considered best practice. Those are the voices they want to live. If somebody like me gets on a podcast and says, I don't think that racism, while I agree that it still exists, it doesn't affect me in my day-to-day life, then they come after saying I'm irresponsible in my
Oh,
conversation,
completely.
right?
Completely.
So that's what you have to understand about our kids is that meaningfully means directed in the way they want that conversation to go.
Yes.
That's what it means.
Because they're making the rules for what competency really means. And I think that
Yes,
was what I was trying to get out during my tirade a few minutes ago. They're the ones trying to come up with what that actually means.
yes. So what it looks like, all students have developmentally appropriate opportunities to engage in discussions with each other, raise problems. They tell you what the problems are and
Hmm.
identify solutions, and they tell you what the solutions are in their
Hmm.
schools and their communities. You will not have a voice.
Hmm.
They will silence you
They will
if you do
productively
not,
challenge inequities.
yes, have a voice in the classroom and take on authentic leadership roles. This is another really freaky thing, but a lot of these peer leaders turn out to be the worst kind of bullies.
Absolutely. In order
They're
to
the ones,
lead, you must learn how to follow. I mean, these are some basic skills
yes,
in
yeah.
life that they need to be learning while they're in an environment that's educating them from source material,
There
not
was a
from
man
ideology.
in one of the Ivy League schools, and he was on one of these peer leadership groups, and he just last week wrote a wrote a big thread, I think on Twitter, but I'm not sure, or X. But it was how they should rape the Jewish women and slaughter the men. And he was a peer leader.
Oh,
What
oh
it looks
my
like in our schools is we can't be friends with you anymore because you just don't follow along
yes,
with what we want. You're
yes,
just not as accepting as someone that we would want. And there's a
yes,
lot of kind of pearl clutching from kids
yes,
who it should never have been an issue for. They're using our children.
yes. They're completely exploiting them in every way
Yes.
possible. Every way possible.
SEL supports adults to strengthen practices that promote
Equity. Here we
equity.
go again.
So, SEL also offers a way for adults to examine how their own social and emotional competencies, and I have pulled that one up when we were talking about the work that teachers have to do. The work that they have to do is the quote unquote
Oh,
anti-racism, that they have to push equal outcomes for every student.
that's right. Everybody gets an A. Everybody gets the trophy. This is such an issue, and address the systemic and individual bias, racism, or oppression that the teachers
Yes,
have had or could have had on the lives of their students.
yes. And I've seen this. I have seen school board members send out letters to people and apologize for their whiteness and anything that
Yes,
they have ever done. And
yes,
what that is it's not virtue signaling. What is it when you take that guilt, you want to be absolved. right?
Yes.
Um, so what happens is that these people want to be absolved, and then they convince themselves of their own self-righteousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just a very unhealthy
Mm-hmm.
environment for students to be in.
Very.
So let's see. I do kind of want to unpack that one and acknowledge and address the larger impact that systemic and individual bias, racism, or oppression may have had on the lives of their students. What they're not going to say is, I am so sorry that when you came in the classroom, I expected less from you.
Yes.
That's not the conversation they're going to
Hmm.
have. That would be addressing bias.
Bingo.
Instead, the conversations are going to be, I'm sorry that I didn't work hard enough to make sure that you had the things that you needed because you're not as capable. And they might not say you aren't as capable, but they will say, um, your, what's it, some kind of trauma, your generational trauma,
Yes.
right? So because of your generational
In,
trauma,
intergenerational trauma.
yes, i.e., because of your race, we're going to adjust the grades here. And that is doing the work. And I've
This
said that
is
before, but if you're hearing it for the first time, I spoke I spoke to a university classroom of grad students, and a person actually asked me, well, how do I grade papers without considering the race? And I looked at them, my jaw dropped, I picked it back up, and I said, use the rubric and the grade.
yes.
It's that easy.
It's absolutely crazy.
It's backwards. It's completely worst practices.
It's the worst. It's absolutely the worst practices and undermines the teacher, undermines kind of the authority figures that children need to respect as well. I mean, we're creating,
Yes.
Chris Rufo made a statement. I forgot who sent me the video. I think Critical Therapy Anecdote had sent it to me, but talking about we're a society of cluster B. Cluster
Yes.
B, is a mixture of personality disorders that are borderline and narcissistic. And what all of this creates is narcissism and narcissistic personalities because
Yes.
everything becomes about what I didn't do for you and what you didn't get from me. And none of this is about personal responsibility. So when he labeled that, and he is not a psychotherapist or psychology, background in any way, shape, or form, but when he made that kind of statement and labeled our society turning into a bunch of cluster B symptoms, he nailed it right on the head. That's exactly what happens when these kids become adults.
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine. Um, and here's the other thing. All it is talk. It's
Yes.
like putting the black box on your Facebook, putting the
Yes.
black circle. There's no actual solutions here. The
Yes.
solutions is to make of our kids the weakest and most dependent people possible.
Yes.
That's literally like everything that Castle says that it's doing the opposite of.
Yes.
Resilient means able to withstand being colonized. That's what resilient means. It does not mean able to do for yourself.
That's right.
So, what it looks like, adults reflect on their own identities, assets, and biases and engage in culturally relevant practices and conversations around equity. Just talk, because I can promise you that even if a teacher says, we don't make a lot of money because we're teachers and we're poor because educators don't make a lot of money, they aren't going to walk over, open up their door, and tell the people who live in the trailer, come take over my house.
Yes.
It's not, so it's all virtue signaling.
It's all virtue signaling. Absolutely.
So, and the
Like
people, go ahead.
the people who you have the West Coast elites here, the West Coast, the liberals or leftists who are all in support of, yes, let's get the homeless housed and let's do this and that, until the city of Los Angeles decides to put up a low income housing complex right across the street. And then you have them freaking out that the value of their house has tanked significantly and overnight. And this is a true story from somebody that I know. Okay. Bleeding heart liberal, can't progress, can't imagine the horrors of this world, is now telling me, oh, well, Jesus, now the value of my property is going to tank. This is unacceptable.
Right. Or the people who say, let's have our kids go out and protest for refugees. And then when they come into their schools and want to use the gym, they're not having that.
That's right. That's right.
So we are low information, and that's on purpose.
Very low information, and
And
it is on purpose. And you're totally right about that too.
and as low as we've been on low information, we're going to go even further because we are putting social and emotional learning and ethnic studies, and we're page by page. It's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're not doubling up and having you do social, emotional, and ethnic studies at the same time in one class. So
Mm-hmm.
you can go to math and math is just math, or science and science. No, it's in everything.
They want this to be they want this to be
This is
a method, a teaching method, so that it's implemented in every single class. It's a method of teaching. That's what they want. That's what this is. Social emotional learning isn't just one little class you take once a week or even every day, but it's actually something that is folded into the way that you teach. You teach with these things in mind, with these edicts here, the ideology. That's what it really is, and that's why it's very dangerous. And I think people don't understand that this is a model of teaching that they're trying to impose upon the kids and impose upon you. It's not a class they're going to take. It's not, and I think that that's something that people have a hard time understanding.
Well, and they do it
the
on
new lens. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's why the flyer at the beginning was just so innocuous if you don't know what you're looking for. If you know what you're looking
Yes.
for, your eyes kind of what?
Yes. Yes.
But if you don't know, it's slow boiling that frog.
Yes.
So schools must engage students, families, and communities as authentic partners in social and emotional development. The
Yes.
relationship between school staff, students, families, and communities are the core of systemic SEL. This means that the people who believe this stuff are coming in and teaching parents why. This is why it's the first time that we're having these meetings. Come to
Yes.
these meetings and learn. In Utah, we actually have a government position to get people to embrace SEL.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes. That's happening across the country.
I think a good part of the reason, one, is that those people that are put in place to guard us, those people that we elect to the school board, they look at the front pages of things and go, oh, that sounds good. And they do not spend the time.
They do not. The only reason that this is such a big deal now, and even still, there's still not enough awareness, but it was COVID. It was when everybody was stayed home and parents started listening to what their kids were learning in the classroom, because they were all working from home and they were all homeschooled at that time, or taking classes on Zoom, on not homeschooled, but taking classes on Zoom. This is why this whole kind of revolution actually started. Without that, you had these individual cases of parents saying, well, my kids, kind of calling me white privilege when they get home from school, and I don't really like it. And you start to but they don't exactly understand why. This all came together as an aha moment for a lot of movements. Moms for Liberty is one of them, that happened because they just stopped and listened to what the teachers in the classes were teaching. And had that not happened, well, I mean, we have a lot of work to do. I mean, don't misunderstand me on that, but at least there's some bit of awareness now that we can start to spread and sound the alarm, because there wasn't one before then, not one that was strong enough to really delve in and wake people up.
Yes. What happened for me was I heard the clip of the teacher freaking out and saying, "What we can't have cameras. We can't have cameras and to show the
Oh
work that
yeah.
we're doing with these
Oh yeah.
kids."
Yeah.
And that's when I was like,
What are you
"Oh, phew,
hiding?
I'm just
Yeah.
gonna pull a desk right up next to mine." And that's when I started to realize that all of this free curriculum that we were getting, this, time for learning and other programs like
Yes.
that, you listen to the books and they're like, "Oh, the cops are bad.
Yes.
Oh, black people are oppressed."
Yes.
Constantly, constantly. And I was going, wait a second, that's not what I signed up for. I don't want him reading these books. And besides that, the level of them is way too under where he was at.
Yes.
But it didn't matter because the focus was to teach these kids, as the NEA said, who cares if these kids can read or write? They know what an insurrection is.
Mm.
Meanwhile, do they? Because right now we're watching people shake the wall
Hello. Hello.
of buildings or sit inside
They stormed
Congress
the
and
Capitol.
protest.
Yes. And
No,
they stormed the
no.
Capitol. They're climbing the walls of the White House. And by the way, one of the founders of BLM, one of the chapter leaders, and I forgot which one it was, it's somewhere, I think, Midwest or East Coast, but
Yeah.
he actually walked away from it and is now a Trump supporter, okay,
Wow.
because of the fact that he saw what was really going on.
Oh yeah, I know
And
who you're talking about.
you
Yeah.
know who I'm talking.
Mhm. I don't know
Okay,
his name,
so
but
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, for this political candidate or not. What I'm trying to say
right.
is that the veil is being lifted over people's eyes that's been
Well,
there
and
for
that's what
so
happened to a
long.
bunch of the Jewish community who supported
Huge,
BLM because they're close.
huge.
They are liberal. I
Yes,
would even
and
say
now
they're
you're
classically liberal.
that's right. And now you're watching them climb up the walls of those are insurrectionists, in my opinion, and those are
Yes.
the ones that are trying to overthrow the government, not what happened on January 6th, where there
Yeah.
was so much footage that showed it was a riot gone bad. I
Yeah.
watched that day live on a live stream that somebody was streaming for
Yeah.
hours. I saw the whole damn thing. Okay, dang. Oh, sorry, my language.
No,
I saw the
no, it's
whole
fine.
thing.
I just think it's
So
important that
this,
people
what's happening
recognize.
now, right? And where are the videos now? They're not filming any of those people,
No,
right? They're not putting things out there that are
no, they
telling
need to
us
be
that
culturally responsive.
right. Absolutely.
There's
Absolutely.
too many people that are the wrong color
That's exactly
to
right.
show. So
Right. They
what it
can.
looks like, students, families, and community partners are active partners in the planning and implementation of school-wide SEL and are represented on the SEL team. All students, families, and community partners have frequent opportunities to share their perspectives and feedback. Once again, only if you have the right ideology.
That's right.
This is what you have to understand about DEI, which is what this is: diversity,
Yes.
equity, and inclusion. There's
Yes.
never diversity of thought. I have
Yes.
seen ethnic studies curriculum, and the only people they highlight all believe the same things. They are
Yes.
all looking for a reason to disrupt the West.
That's
That is
right.
the goal. That's the goal of social and emotional learning. And
Disrupt
we
the
have
West.
been a little over an hour. So,
Yes. Yes. We can wrap up for today.
yeah, I'd like to wrap up for today, but I definitely want to come back
Yes.
in a couple of days and just hit everything on this page by page.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent. Excellent.
thank you so much. I so appreciate you jumping on with
Yes, I appreciate you for all the hard work you're doing. I mean, really, it's admirable, honestly. So thank you for providing such an amazing platform.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, have a great
All
day.
right, you too. Take care.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. I had my thumbnail, guys.